Hello and welcome to the Transfers Podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com, where we bring you news, insight and analysis on that most important of the least important things, football. I'm Duncan Castles and I'm joined this week by one of our most popular Transfer Podcast guests, a Roman emperor of football journalists and the leading man of Italian broadcaster Rai. Welcome back to the Transfers Podcast, Aurelio Capaldi.
Hello, everybody.
How are you doing, Aurelio? How's your summer been?
Fine. I'm very interested in what's happening and it's full of news, so very curious.
Indeed, so much to discuss in this transfer market, but let's dive in where we left off last time you spoke to us. That was May, when the two of us detailed a contract conflict between just about to be crowned, as it was, European champions Paris Saint-Germain and their goalkeeper Gianluigi Donnarumma. We explained on that podcast how PSG wanted Donnarumma to sign a revision to his 10 million a year net contract before it entered its final season, in order to avoid the Italy international doing the same thing he did when he left AC Milan to join PSG and leaving on a free transfer when his contract at PSG expires next summer. We also said that Donnarumma was proving difficult to negotiate with and that he'd warned PSG that he had options elsewhere, including one that Aurelio pointed out, which was Internazionale. Now, over the last few days, that conflict has turned into, I think, what we can basically describe as open warfare between Donnarumma and PSG, with the goalkeeper excluded from PSG's first team squad and replaced by new signing Luca Chevalier for last night's slightly fortunate European Super Cup win over Tottenham. Now, again, that's something the Transfers Podcast exclusively reported on 1st August. That was PSG's plan, and that they'd warned Donnarumma that if he decided to stay and see his contract out, he would be excluded from the squad and he wouldn't play any games this season. Luis Enrique, the PSG coach, has explained this by saying that it's his decision because he wanted a different type of goalkeeper. Donnarumma has talked publicly, complaining that he hasn't had a chance to say goodbye to the team's fans and hopes that if he has to leave the club, he would be able to do that. And Donnarumma's agent, Enzo Raiola, has given a series of interviews to the Italian press, talking about how PSG changed the terms of their offer and basically complaining about the way PSG have handled this situation and even threatening to take legal action against Paris Saint-Germain over the way they've handled this. Aurelio, you know Donnarumma very well from your time covering him in Serie A, from when he broke into Milan's team as a 16-year-old and became an Italy national team goalkeeper. How do you see this situation?
Well, it's a very bad situation because Donnarumma is a sensitive guy. He's not just a guy thinking about money, but he also has feelings and he loves these PSG mates. So imagine from one day to another, he doesn't get the call for the Super Cup final. In a world where nobody seems to take responsibility, Luis Enrique said that it's his responsibility. So I must say that he was loyal to the club and he was responsible, but his words are not convincing this time. He's an honest man, but he said Donnarumma is a top goalkeeper and as a human being is even better. So what's the problem? If we listen to Luis Enrique's words, there is no reason not to pick him up because, PSG decided to sign Chevalier. Luis Enrique has the right to change his mind about the goalkeeper. He can play the new signing, but he didn't even choose Donnarumma to be among his teammates. and that hurts. From a human point of view, it's very disturbing, and Donnarumma, of course, is not happy and is suffering about this. You just can't say he's under contract, he's earning good money. No, it's also a matter of respect. And while Luis Enrique says this is football at the highest level, that's not convincing, because this is football at the highest level, but Luis Enrique is a man of values too. He always showed great respect for everybody, and this time I don't understand his words, considering that everybody knows that it's not only a matter of relationship between Luis Enrique and Donnarumma. It's a matter of negotiations, and it's a problem with the club, clearly. I know that Donnarumma now is thinking about his future. His agent talked, explained the situation, explained the point of view, and I guess that they are now looking at the Premier League. But for sure, the story between Paris Saint-Germain and Donnarumma deserved a much better ending.
Yes, it's turned into a conflict that could have been avoided. I think you're right to underline that what Enrique said is not the whole story. In fact, we've discussed the background to the story on the podcast, and it's a combination, as I understand it, of football matters and financial matters. And there has been an ongoing discussion between Donnarumma, his agent, Raiola, and the club about the terms under which he would continue. Paris Saint-Germain wanted him to continue and made him an offer to do so, but on reduced salary to fit into the contractual terms that they've used across the board with new players coming into the club, which is that you only get a percentage of your salary guaranteed upon signing for the club, but it gets made up rapidly to 100% once you play a certain number of games. And Paris Saint-Germain wanted to shift Donnarumma, who has one of the highest contracts in the club, onto that structure. Raiola's been a bit unclear about whether they were ready to accept or not. He said words suggested they were ready to accept. PSG's position is that in those negotiations at the beginning, Donnarumma and Raiola were indicating that they were ready to run the contract down, that he was interested in moving elsewhere, and then they shifted stance once it got to the point where PSG said, well, we will replace you. Raiola's talked about the strongest options for Donnarumma being in the Premier League. Which clubs do you think Donnarumma is actively in discussions with at present, Aurelio?
I think that Manchester City and Chelsea are two clubs who might be very interested in him, and he might be very interested in going to the Premier League. He's fascinated by Guardiola and City, but he also likes London and Chelsea. So I think that these are two possibilities, concrete possibilities for him.
So the information we have that Manchester United had inquired about the possibility of taking Donnarumma earlier in the summer in terms of looking at the financial context of that deal. At that point, I was told that it would only be possible if Andre Onana left the club. Guidance I have from Manchester United today is that they're not actively pursuing a deal for Donnarumma, so that seems to be one that they've set aside, where now that they've signed Benjamin Sesko and two other forwards, put a lot of money into the attack and are trying to improve their midfield in what could be a very expensive deal for Carlos Baleba. Manchester City, as we said in the podcast, they've been open to allowing Ederson to leave this summer. Ederson is wanted by Galatasaray. As I understand it, City don't actually have a formal offer for the player. Interesting, you mentioned Pep Guardiola, because a friend of this podcast, Guillaume Balaguer, was discussing Pep Guardiola's interest in Donnarumma yesterday, and he said that Guardiola considers Donnarumma to be one of the 3 best goalkeepers in the world. Chelsea have been briefing that they don't want to change at goalkeeper, although they explored the deal for Mike Maignan of Milan earlier in the summer. Aurelio, is there a market for Andrea Onana in Italy at present, where Manchester United to try and move Onana out to allow a change in goalkeeper?
Well, this is something which must be discussed. But about goalkeepers, everybody seems to say that they are fine, they are okay, and then suddenly it might happen that they change goalkeeper. For example, Inter Milan looked fine during the last years, but then they changed goalkeepers more than once. At the moment, I can't see the 2 Milan teams changing goalkeepers. For example, AC Milan seem to be ready to sell Maignan just one day before Massimiliano Allegri took over. When Massimiliano Allegri took over, said Maignan is not going anywhere. So the situation with goalkeepers is always open.
And just to get guidance from PSG and where they are now that it's publicly known that Donnarumma is available for sale, is that they haven't received an offer for the players yet, but they've had inquiries for Donnarumma to find out what the financial terms would be. And they think, as Raiola has said, that the most likely outcome is a move to the Premier League. Aurelio, let's move on to another player who could be headed out of a Manchester club and on his way to Italian football, or on his way back to Italian football in this case. That's Rasmus Hojlund. Hojlund has been made surplus to requirements at Manchester United after the signing of Šeško, even though he's publicly stated that he wants to remain and fight for his place. Over the last few days, there have been negotiations between Milan and Manchester United over a transfer for the 22-year-old Denmark international. Can you update us on where those negotiations are?
Well, the situation is open. Massimiliano Allegri likes the player and the clubs are talking, and it's a matter of money, as always. And Milan are ready to take him on loan for about 6 million, and then they would like an option to buy for a certain amount of money, which might be 34, 35 million. While Manchester United want more, and you can understand it, as they paid him so much from Atalanta. So the situation is open, the negotiations are there, and this is something which might happen.
And both sides have to convince Hojlund still that this is the right move for him to make. Some interesting comments from Arrigo Sacchi about Hojlund in the last few days and his apparent reluctance to move to Milan.
Yeah, at the start, the news seemed to be that the player didn't want to leave Manchester, and Milan tried to inquire more, and as I said, the situation is open, so they know that the transfer is possible. They're looking for a guy like him. They're looking for someone who can be effective, but as he did with Atalanta, not with Manchester United. On the other side, they have Santiago Giménez, but that can't be the only choice for Massimiliano Allegri up front.
So our SciSports estimated transfer value of Hojlund is 47.2 million euros. Manchester United briefing that they think they can get 50 million euros as a total package for this deal. But whatever way it goes, it seems that both sides, Manchester United and Milan, are happy to do it on the basis of a loan fee for one season with no obligation to buy. And that's for a player who Manchester United just 2 years ago signed for an initial guaranteed 75 million euros from Atalanta. He's now had 3 seasons, Aurelio, in top league football, top tier football. That first season in Serie A, which saw Manchester United buy him, where he scored 9 goals in 32 games for Atalanta. His first season at Manchester United was actually the best scoring season of his career, 10 Premier League goals in 30. And then just 4 last season. If you look at his analytics that we use in SciSports, compare him to other strikers in the Premier League in terms of his performance last season, his finishing comes out on about a mid-tier level, and particularly poor on headers, surprisingly poor on headers given his stature. You watched his development in Italian football. I remember at the time you telling me that you thought Manchester United were overpaying for a player, which was an opinion I heard from other sports directors in football. Do you think this is a player whose career can be resurrected by returning to Italy and having a club of Milan's stature invested in proving that he can become the player that some people thought he could become 2 years ago?
I always thought that Manchester United overpaid him, and the winner of the bargain was Atalanta, because they got so much from him in one season. It's difficult to say if he's going to be a top striker coming back to Italy, but for sure he needs some change. He needs motivation. Massimiliano Allegri is the kind of coach who can motivate players. He has already done with some other strikers. He's a guy who tries to put a lot of self-belief in the players, so he can help him. But I have my doubts about Hojlund being a top goal scorer.
And what would your expectation be on Milan's intentions? If he has a reasonable season, would it be a problem for them to meet 50 million euros total package in a year's time? Or will they likely still have financial issues in a year's time where that becomes a difficult decision for them to make?
A difficult decision to make, because they are thinking of spending about 40 million total package. So the reason why they want to have him on loan the first season at 6 million is that they want to see if he can perform at the highest level in Serie A, and if he can be the guy he used to be at Atalanta. But then 50 million total package is too much for them. At the moment, they have to be very careful.
You're talking about Milan having to be very careful. Let's talk about a player who I think is an example of that. Malik Thiaw, who has just moved to Newcastle United for an initial 35 million euros with 5 million of performance-related variables. He's a 24-year-old right-footed centre-back. For Newcastle, it means that they've got a player for a position that they've been trying to fill for the last 3 years. As a younger player, they can develop into a first-team starter. An interesting kind of backstory with Thiaw this summer, in that Milan were ready to sell him to Como for 25 million euros early in the window, but the player rejected that deal, as I understand it, because he knew there was a possibility that Newcastle United would bid for him later in the summer. He was then integrated into Allegri's team during pre-season, and Allegri had decided he wanted to keep him in for the season. And then this offer comes from Newcastle United, and they pretty much immediately sell and replace with Coni de Winter from Genoa.
Yes, that's true. Allegri liked him. He wanted to keep him, but then a very good offer came from Newcastle, and the club needed the money, so they decided to sell him. He's a central defender who can play right back. He has good feet when it comes to playing the ball. He's a good player. He only has to improve his concentration, because sometimes he loses his focus and he can be clumsy. I remember, for example, the first day of last season, AC Milan were playing Torino at home. He made an own goal, very clumsy. But if I have to judge on what I saw during this time at AC Milan, most of the times he has been good. He has to improve his concentration, but he's a good central defender in my opinion.
Tall and very quick, which is kind of a parameter that Premier League clubs buy frequently these days when they look for centre-backs. We have another Italian base centre-back moving to the Premier League today. I believe the deal will go through. It's a younger player than Thiaw, Giovanni Leoni, a 19-year-old at Parma, who Liverpool have come in, and I believe the financials on that deal are an initial €30 million with €5 million of bonuses and a sell-on clause. Is that correct, Aurelio?
Yes, Giovanni Leoni is a great player, and there are young central defenders that are emerging in Italy, and they are attracting Premier League clubs like Leoni and Coppola. In Italy, everybody is talking about Leoni because he's so young, and Inter wanted him because Christian Chivu is the manager who gave him the chance at Parma when he was Parma manager. So he was very interested in him, but Inter couldn't sign him also because they have problems selling players. So Chivu really wanted him, but they couldn't sign him. And Liverpool were keen on him, and it was a good deal for Parma too, because they paid him €6 million last season from Sampdoria. This is a boy who is very determined, who is strong, and he faces challenges. He likes to knock obstacles. He has had problems with dyslexia too, but he's strong mentally. We all remember that he marked so well Lukaku in Parma-Napoli at the end of last season, when Napoli absolutely needed to win in Parma, but he played so well against him. So I think Leoni is definitely a good signing.
Also very tall, 1.96 m, and from what I can see on the analytics, positionally very good. How long before a player like Leoni is ready to be a starter for Liverpool? Did you see that as a first season in which he plays occasional games, or would he be, if Liverpool had an injury crisis, would he be a reliable starting centre-back for them at such a young age?
Well, of course, this is a young guy, so he must be given time to adapt and to grow. But he's already at a good point. He's very mature for his age. And I think if a situation like the one you talked about were there, I think he would be ready to face the challenge.
We should update quickly on where Liverpool are with Mark Guehi, because we do not think that Leoni will be the only centre-back they sign before the end of the transfer window. We told you in July that Liverpool had prioritised Guehi's signing and that his preference was to join them. There have now been club-to-club conversations. Steve Parish, the co-owner of Crystal Palace, talked about selling Guehi last week, given that he's in the final year of contract, and said we'd have to do that, of course, for players of that calibre to leave on a free. It's a problem for us, unfortunately. It looks like that will be used as a lever in the negotiations. Guehi holds that threat to potentially leave in a free transfer in a year's time as part of an arsenal to bring the price down for Liverpool. And it would be interesting if the price on Guehi ended up being not that much more than the price they paid Parma for a 19-year-old talent. Just talking about those young centre-backs, you mentioned Diego Coppola, who Brighton have signed from Hellas Verona for, I believe, 11 million euros. Obviously, we want to pay attention to Coppola because Brighton have been exceptionally good at picking up players from all around Europe and South America and Asia as well in recent years. Tell us a bit about Coppola, Aurelio, and also tell us why you think Italian football is so good at developing these young centre-backs at present.
Well, Coppola is another young player, physically strong, good timing, also can play the ball well. People in Italy talk more about Leoni, but also Coppola is a good prospect. He was also picked for the national squad. So I think it's an interesting signing for Brighton. And as you said, Brighton is a club that know how to do things well. So about central defenders in Italy, it's a matter of tradition, and Italy always had very good central defenders. During the recent past, we haven't had any more Cannavaro or any more Nesta, but good youngsters are growing up, and Leoni and Coppola are nice examples.
So good coaching at a development level for young centre backs, and also being able to watch the history of Italian football and the tradition of the way that these players perform in the league.
Yes, and also the attention on the marking, but also the ability to play the ball when it is needed. So especially young coaches are working on that, and the input is work on the technique more.
Okay, so a combination of the defensive fundamentals and the ability to create play from defence is the two elements that Italian football really benefits from there.
Exactly.
Let's move on to Juventus, who are trying to put themselves back into a position where they can win Serie A again after several difficult years. They've been trying to get Randall Kolo Muani from Paris Saint-Germain, having had a successful 6 months of the Frenchman being on loan with them this last season, but have yet to agree a fee with the Parisian club. As I understand it, they want to minimise the guaranteed cost of the deal with a 10 million loan fee, and then an obligation that's based on performances for Kolo Muani. They don't actually want to commit to buying him. PSG want to sell this summer. They've had interest from England, and they continue to foster interest from Newcastle United, Tottenham Hotspur, and Aston Villa. Do you think Juventus are going to be able to complete this deal, Aurelio? And do they have the capacity to change the financial terms to suit Paris Saint-Germain?
I think they are very determined to do that, and also the player likes Turin and Juventus, so the months he spent in Italy were good for him, and that's an advantage for Juventus. They have a difficult situation with the strikers because of Vlahovic. Vlahovic, for example, scored in the friendly between Juventus and Juventus Next Gen, so the two teams of the house, but the crowd were very angry with him, and the situation is heated. The fans just want him out. He seems to be nervous, so everybody knows that Juventus would like to sell him, but Juventus can get the right conditions to sell him. Wages are very high. So Vlahovic at the moment is a big question mark for Juventus. And Tudor made it clear that he'd be very happy if Kolo Muani came back to Juve. So at the moment, the situation is open, but at Juventus, they see it as a very possible deal.
So it's kind of a standoff between the players' preference to remain at Juventus and whether one of these English clubs will come on with a better financial offer to PSG, which forces Juventus to increase their bid.
Yes, we know that until the deal is done, you can say it's done. And for example, in Italy, everybody was convinced that Ndoye would go to Napoli because he was on the top list of Antonio Conte. And then we know how it ended. So everybody at Juve thinks that Kolo Muani will be back, but it still must be done.
And Jadon Sancho, a few weeks ago, we thought that Sancho was close to completing a move to Juventus. That's where he was going to try and relaunch his career. Has that fallen through for the same reason as the Kolo Muani deal hasn't been completed, that Juventus are struggling to raise cash and move expensive players out, and Kolo Muani is the priority as a player to come in for them?
Yeah, Kolo Muani is the priority, and Jadon Sancho is not. We can say this, and Juventus couldn't manage to sell some players, and so they were not able to sign Jadon Sancho. Also because they are not fully convinced it can be the old Sancho. So they inquired for him. It seemed possible, but now Kolo Muani is the priority.
The Italian market in general, there isn't a lot of money there, would be one thing that's fair to say. Looking at last season's top 10 clubs in Serie A, only 3 clubs so far have a net spend on transfer fees of 50 million euros or more at present. So that's almost the same as Nottingham Forest paid for Dan Adoy, who you've just mentioned, choosing to go to a mid-status Premier League club instead of the Italian champions. 5 of the clubs in the top 10 are net sellers at present, and the biggest individual sales of 6 of the Serie A clubs have been to Premier League sides. Is this just a fact of life for Italian football now, that they cannot spend heavily on players in the way that they've done for so many years?
Yeah, they can't spend big money, and this is clear. They have to make the most of a difficult situation, so they try to do their best, but facts are facts, and as you said, they are not in a situation where they can spend big.
Is that because of television revenues declining, Aurelio?
Well, it's because of television problems, but also because it's difficult for Serie A to be more attractive than Premier League, for example. There are still top players coming, but not at the most important time of their careers. Kevin De Bruyne to Napoli is very interesting. I'm sure he will do well, but De Bruyne probably had the best time of his career at Manchester City. Luka Modric at AC Milan is very interesting. He's still a top player, class, winning mentality. That's what Allegri needs. But Luka Modric had his best years at Real Madrid. No doubt about that, and he's almost 40. I'm sure he can do something very good at AC Milan. But if Luka Modric was 5-10 years younger, AC Milan couldn't afford him. So it's a matter of television revenues, but also it's a matter of attraction.
One interesting point is that the highest net spenders in Serie A at present are Como, who finished 10th last season in their first campaign back in Serie A after a 21-year absence. They're owned by a pair of Indonesian billionaires, Robert and Michael Hartono, with an estimated net worth of figures over $40 billion. But even though they're the highest net spenders and they've got that amount of money behind them, they seem to be concentrating their spending this summer on younger players.
Yeah, as you said, they have two owners who are really very, very rich, but they spend in a very intelligent way because they are investing on young players, emerging players with talent. They do everything with Cesc Fabregas, because Fabregas is the brain of Como at the moment, and they usually sign young players emerging, but they've also signed, for example, Morata, because Fabregas needed an experienced guy, and he can be very useful to help the youngsters grow. But Como are probably the only Italian club making real investments at the moment. They are, for example, they signed Baturina from Dinamo Zagreb, and the level of expectation for this player is big. They signed Ramon from Real Madrid. Everybody thinks that he can become a great defender. So they spend good money on interesting signings, but they do everything with Cesc Fabregas, who, as you said, got the 10th place last year with 49 points, and it was a huge surprise because everybody thought that Como would fight to avoid relegation till the very end. They played an attractive football, and we've got to remember that Fabregas took over the first team 2 years ago. He was promoted to Serie A, and then he got the 10th place in the second year. So he's doing very well. He gave a precise identity to the team. He likes to have control, high pressing. He wants his team to get the ball back as soon as possible, and he's not afraid to give, for example, a young talent like Nico Paz all the freedom that he needs and that he deserves.
Nico Paz, you mentioned a young talent. That's another player that they took from Real Madrid, I believe, last summer, and have been turning down offers from the Premier League, from Tottenham Hotspur, to bring him to England, he's done so well. Real Madrid have buyback options and matching rights on that player. But yeah, let's talk about the young coach, because Fabregas is 38 years of age. He's always a super intelligent individual as a player. From breaking into that Arsenal team as a teenager, he's got a fascinating background as a player, in that he worked under Arsene Wenger, Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte, among other coaches. So he's seen an array of different managerial styles. And I'm looking at a comment here from Sergi Roberto, who was a former Barcelona teammate who Fabregas brought to Como last season to help them stay in Serie A, in that first division back. And he says Cesc reads games very well and reads the opponents very well. When it comes to preparing a game, he always has 2 or 3 options. And the truth is that during games, what we have been working on during the week always happens. Now, that sounds very familiar to me. That's the kind of thing we heard players who were coached by Mourinho talking about one of his great strengths as a coach. So is Fabregas in a position where he's integrating all of these bits and pieces from different coaching styles and turning into something that could be really special at highest level?
He seems always ready to get the best of everybody. And during his first season at Serie A, after games, he used to talk to other managers. He always said he wanted to learn more. He talked to more experienced managers like Claudio Ranieri, for example. He always tries to find out more details. He wants to exchange ideas. He's a very curious guy. He's always on evolution, and he studies a lot. He has clear ideas, and he has no fear for any opponents. What really impressed about Como was that Como played without fears and without any doubts against bigger opponents. And so even if they had an away game against a big team, they played it as if they wanted to be dominant. They wanted to have control. They wanted to play offensive. They wanted to do high pressing, get the ball, have the initiative. So he worked a lot on the technique, but he worked a lot on the mentality, on giving courage and confidence to the team, and it worked well.
Most of the clubs in the top part of Serie A have actually changed coach this summer. I think it's 6 of the top 8 clubs in terms of finishers last season have switched coach, and that would have been 7 if Antonio Conte had got his way and managed to get out of his Napoli contract. Yes. Interesting move of Gianpiero Gasperini to Roma, the latest guy to come in and try and solve Roma's long-standing problems from Atalanta. And Atalanta then going to a coach that we saw a little bit of in the Premier League last season, in Ivan Juric, who took over Southampton mid-season, left in April following the earliest relegation in Premier League history, and left with a record of 14 games, 1 win and 1 draw. Now, it doesn't seem like the most obvious choices to replace a coach who won the Europa League in 23-24, in his 9 seasons at Atalanta, never finished lower than 10th, and put together 6 top 4 finishes. Why did Atalanta go for Juric?
Not the most obvious choice is a very kind expression. I think the big question is, how is that possible? How is that possible? Everybody is really trying to understand the decision of Atalanta. The thing is that the Percassi family always made very good choices, so that's why they have credit, and the fans trust them because they got so so many good results. But for sure, after saying goodbye to Giampiero Gasperini, who was in charge of the club at a very important time and won the Europa League, everybody expected something different. So it's a big bet. Some critics say that the club probably wants to prove that it was not only Gasperini that mattered so much. I always believed it was a combination of factors, and Gasperini was a big factor, not the only one, because the club is strong. Look at what's happening with Lukman, for example. Inter thought they could get him at their conditions. Atalanta said, we want 50 million, and if Inter are not willing to pay 50, they won't get him. So the club is strong. They have a good organization. They can choose players well. And let's see what happens with Juric. But for sure, it was a big surprise, and many fans just accepted it because they trust the Percassi family.
Juric, a former assistant of Gasperini's. But yes, that's it's one you don't see very often, as a club is upset that the coach has taken too much credit, so they go and pick one of the most bizarre replacement coaches to apparently try and demonstrate that it's their decisions behind the scenes that were important to recent successes. How do you think Gasperini will do at Roma? Because that strikes me as quite a high risk move for him, given the years of success he's had at Atalanta, and given that the Friedkins now own Everton in the Premier League. I presume they haven't said it in Italy, but the assumption would be that Everton is more important to them than Roma, and it must be difficult to get a decent amount of spend on a substandard squad for Gasperini now that he's moved there.
Well, Gasperini took the Roma job because of Claudio Ranieri. It was Claudio Ranieri who chose him. He trusts Claudio Ranieri. Claudio Ranieri held the meetings with Gasperini and the Friedkin family. They have clear aims. The first season, they want Roma to be back in the Champions League. The second season, Roma will be 100 years in 2027, and they want to try to win the Scudetto. So they have clear ideas on their minds, and Gasperini trusted Ranieri and the Friedkin. He thinks some signings have been made, some signings have to be made again, but he thinks he can do well. He needed a change after so many years at Atalanta, where he had made the most of what he could do, and I think he can do well.
We've heard those promises before from the Friedkins about what they want to do at Roma and how much money they're going to put into to make them happen, though, haven't we? Like Jose Mourinho could tell some interesting stories about that sales pitch.
After every Roma friendly game, when Gasperini talks to the press, the questions are about the market and about the new signings. And his answers are always very interesting, because on one side, he must say that he's confident that the right players will come. On the other side, he shows a little bit of anxiety, because the sooner you have players, the better it is. But now they signed Wesley, the Brazilian right back, Elayanui midfield, and another interesting central defender, young central defender, Gilardi. But there is still work to be done.
And they've taken Evan Ferguson on loan from Brighton, which would be...
Yes. Ferguson, he expects a lot. Yeah, he expects a lot from Ferguson.
And currently negotiating with Aston Villa for Leon Bailey.
Yes, but in his mind, Roma have to change a lot, especially because he has fresh ideas and he needs the right players to make them happen.
Since we've been talking about managerial changes, I just have to ask you, Gennaro Gatusso, as of June, the coach of Italy, how did that happen?
Well, it happened because Luciano Spalletti was a disaster. He still hasn't recovered from his national side failure, and Italy needed someone ready. The options were just very few, and Gattuso was there available, and so the Italian association decided to go for him. This is something that is going to be interesting on one side and risky on the other side. For sure, Gattuso knows what it means to wear the Italy national side shirt. And from that point, he can give the right spirit to the team. On the other side, Italy cannot afford to fail again. And so it's going to be a very interesting bet.
Aurelio, let's finish with a hero and villain of the summer. I'll let you choose the hero.
The hero is Marquinhos, because he won another title as Paris Saint-Germain captain. He's always very charismatic, and after the Super Cup win, he said, "This is for Gigio Donnarumma," and that was class, in my opinion, considering the dispute between his club and Donnarumma, and he showed that he and his teammates are still devoted and grateful to Donnarumma.
That's a nice UEFA-related hero. I'll choose a UEFA-related villain, and that will be the multi-club ownership rules that European football has tried to bring in to protect the integrity of European competition, and which have seen Crystal Palace demoted from the Europa League to the Conference League. That confirmed by CAS this week because of Lyon's finish in French football. What's fascinating about these rules is, as has been pointed out, while they are intended to remove question marks about the integrity of Europe's competitions, they're placing question marks on the integrity of the national leagues. Why? Because people are asking questions about, for example, Strasbourg, who were in a position with 2 Ligue 1 games left where they could have finished third in Ligue 1. If they had done that, and as a sister club of Chelsea had finished 4th or below in the Premier League, which was realistically all they could achieve at that point, then with both teams achieving Champions League qualification, Strasbourg would have gone in ahead of Chelsea. The team that finishes higher in its domestic league has priority under the European rules. What happened? Strasbourg lost their last 2 matches after a very long run of success to 2 relegation candidates, 2-1 at Angers and then 3-2 at home to Le Havre. In that game against Le Havre, there was a handball penalty, a last-minute penalty and a red card. And if you watch the highlights, you'll see Strasbourg defenders making a couple of appalling errors that should have led to goals before Le Havre scored their winner. Now, nobody knows if there was any intentionality in that. Certainly Le Havre and Angers were fighting to avoid relegation, so they were motivated to win those games. But it's fair to ask questions. And when we now have a situation where you have that set up because of the rules, because we have so much multi-club ownership in European football, I think it's just it's another problem the European game has, and which the authorities haven't come up with an effective and satisfying solution to as yet. Aurelio, what are your thoughts on multi-club ownership in European football?
I think that they have to be avoided. There is a need of clarity, and I think that an owner must own only one club and concentrate on that club, because we're talking about big clubs, and just make the most of it. So I think that there must be more clarity on the matter.
Yeah, there's ramifications for competition, for the belief in the integrity of the competition, for the transfer market. It runs throughout the game. Aurelio, thank you so much for joining us near the end of the window and just before the Italian season starts again. As always, it's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Ciao.
You've been listening to the Transfers Podcast, powered by FootballTransfers.com. If you like what you heard, spread the word. Please follow, share, and if you can, rate us and leave us a review on your podcast platform. It really helps get the podcast to more listeners. You can subscribe to the Football Transfers app for more information on what's going on in the market. Do that on FootballTransfers.com. You can message us on Instagram, YouTube and Facebook at Transfers Podcast. Our Twitter, Blue Sky and TikTok address is at TransfersCast. I'm on Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky at Duncan Castles. Aurelio is at Aurelio Capaldi. Our production's by Mark Caulfield at Pro Podcast Production, and our music by Mark Caulfield and David L. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for listening.
Can't go. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go.